What's up, friends? Welcome. It's time to elevate and thrive. And on today's episode, we're going to explore what's keeping you tired. In fact, we're going to get into the top 5 energy killers, how to identify what's killing your energy, and what you can do about it. This is Barry Napier. Of course, I am here with the incredible and extremely talented Dr. Angela Yeagley.
Thank you, Barry. You are awesome as well. Always, of course.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
And thank you for that very generous intro. Much appreciated.
Yeah, so this is a topic that we deal with a lot here in the clinic, right? Energy and feeling tired, feeling down.
A ton,
right? And so on today, we want to get into maybe what we've over time kind of seen as the top 5 reasons why people are generally feeling tired.
Yes. Yeah. And, to that point, I would say that, most people do feel usually like it's one thing, they're like, usually it's the thyroid. And I think that's just because of that's what's out there on
you do some
media.
WebMD searches.
Yeah.
Why am I tired all the time?
Always. It's the thyroid.
Thyroid or adrenal dysfunction maybe, or
yes. Yeah.
maybe sleep apnea or something.
And sleep, all of that stuff. Yeah. And so, to your point again, that it's coming from multiple different places, and so we really have to dive in and we're usually not looking at just one thing. We have to kind of address all these different areas that we'll talk about today. Super important. And I found that especially when somebody's been chronically tired over a long period of time, that's really when we have to go deeper, as opposed to, say, if sometimes you can identify like somebody caught COVID or they, had a flu and for the past few weeks they've been tired. That's going to be a little different approach. We've got some immune system recovery there, right?
Yeah, I think we can look at maybe the different scenarios where it's this chronic, long-lasting condition where you just feel really low energy, tired generally all the time. It's not event-oriented where there was some like precipitating factor. Yeah, like I got sick or this specific thing happened. And since that, I've really struggled with my energy. It's more like if it's all the time, you're just low. Now, if it is something like a cold or flu or something that kind of knocks you down and you're slowly recovering, then sometimes some of the things we're going to talk about today can actually be very beneficial as well.
Oh, absolutely. Sometimes, people maybe they're a little predisposed, like they were tired anyway, and then they got sick and now they're extremely exhausted, but there was something there, or the virus like exacerbated something that they already had, whether it was like a thyroid dysfunction or adrenal fatigue, right? Or some other virus, chronic virus that they're carrying around. So
right, some other thing that's going on.
Other thing, yes.
Yeah, that's how it often is when people show up here. You have a little bit of detective work to do.
Yes.
And one of the places that we start immediately is with nutritional deficiencies, right? That's one of the top energy killers. So let's talk a little bit about that.
So typically, we do we're going to look at, full history. We're going to look at your diet. We're going to look at any maybe diet trends that you've been on, like have you been keto, or are you restricting, or are you, doing something like maybe doing a lot of fast food.
Yeah, maybe like living on Dick's burgers.
Nutrient deficient food. Yeah.
You're on the Dick's diet.
The Dick's diet, yeah. Very popular here. And so really the other way to just tell is we just do lab testing. That's kind of, you can see signs in people, like if somebody has pale, like eyelids or their nails are pale, or that's iron deficiency. there's certain things you can see in the body. If you have these like different spots or ridges on your nails, usually that's a mineral or zinc deficiency, and the tongue, if it gets super, super dark red, that's actually B's. But it's nice to confirm all of that with some actually direct measurements. So, and then we can dial it in. And as you know, I really like, if people are open to it, I like doing the genetic testing for like at least starting with like the B vitamins, because those are so important for energy creation. So that would be like the MTHFR.
As a minimum, there's quite a bit of genetic testing that ideally we would love to see, but at a minimum, that one can be really critical when it comes to energy and mood and how the body handles the various B vitamins and whatnot.
Right. What your need for what we call the active forms or the methylated forms, right? So if there's a mutation there, then we need to be a little bit like extraordinary within the way that like we would support your B vitamins and all the amino acids that surround that, right? Right.
And I think that's the thing that we don't quite realize, the degree to which we can really be a beautiful snowflake, in that we're each so unique and special in our needs, that we don't realize that sometimes what one person needs just to get baseline can be very, very different than somebody else.
Yes.
Based on how their genetic situation's going on, where their overall state is and health state. And that's where the testing really comes in. So we can dial that precision medicine.
Yeah. And it makes a difference. Like, so we talked about, in the past, like looking again at the B's, at iron, at vitamin D, your minerals are very, very important. And then if we're looking at, so some of those measurements would also be like homocysteine for the B's. I like checking glutathione, which is a super antioxidant as well. And what's really cool is that when we're getting into nutritional medicine, so we can actually check for mutations in nutrients beyond B vitamins. So there's actually a vitamin D mutation, there's an iron mutation, there's a glutathione mutation. There are the other antioxidants called like SAMe and vitamin A, vitamin C.
There's a whole laundry
they
list.
all have them. Yes,
the alphabets of vitamins. And even if you have a good diet, where you're kind of eating more whole foods and real foods and mostly unprocessed foods, you can still be deficient in a number of these minerals. I mean, there's the whole interesting thing around the quality of our food these days, the quality of the soil that things are grown in, and that from a nutritional standpoint, really over the last 70, 80, 90 years, there's been a massive fall off in just baseline nutrition, even of organic, clean, wholesome foods. They just are less nutritious and nutrient dense than they used to be.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And we also, like you did mention, genetically modified.
Ooh,
100 years ago, we didn't have that, right? Like that wasn't even around. Yeah. And what's, interesting and odd about that is that I have people, and I've seen this again and again throughout the years, say I have somebody who has a severe gluten, intolerance. And so it makes them sick. It gives them headaches, something like that, makes them tired. They go to Europe where GMO is completely banned. You can't even, bring a ship up to dock with GMO foods in it. And they can eat it, no problem. That's weird. That's weird. Something's wrong.
It also explains why perhaps when I was in Italy last, I could just eat pizza and gelato all day long, every day. Never gained a pound. It's non-GMO gelato.
Yeah,
that's the secret. Non-GMO pizza. Delicious. Could have also
probably had nothing to do with all the walking.
It probably had nothing to do with the 20,000 plus steps a day.
Right.
I think it was the GMOs.
You know what? Strangely, I think, and I have heard that same story from people. Again, there's tons of walking. People are, you're not usually driving a car when you're in Europe, but
the
there is something
quantities are
different.
Smaller. So I would eat like legit a whole pizza every single day.
But the pizza was like 10 inches.
Yeah, but it's much smaller. It's not like a Pagliacci's large or something. Right. It's very, the dough is thin. It's all so fresh and delicious. There is something there. It is interesting.
There is something there. So at this point, as I understand it, it's hard to avoid GMO. Like in America, there are going to be some cross contaminations, but if you have the option, right, if you're choosing your breads, if you're choosing your other things, always get the thing that says non-GMO, because it's going to at least be like 90%, non-GMO.
Do the best you can, but that one is one that can make a difference.
It makes a difference. And actually, gluten is its whole other thing. I'll just say that usually a lot of times it makes people tired for people who are sensitive to it.
To gluten.
Yeah, I see that bump in energy, and usually people lose a little weight because it causes inflammation. So we'll just put it on the list, right, of things to consider.
I think it's a good one to put on the list. Let's talk a little bit about sleep. That's another one of the big energy killers as our top 5. So one is nutritional deficiencies. That's a top energy killer. Let's go into sleep. That's another, obvious one to explore, but there's some non-obvious things to talk about when it comes to sleep disturbances.
Yeah. So, of course, I think everybody always thinks of sleep hygiene, right? Like, are you sleeping in a dark room? Are you like not sleeping?
Dark, cold, and quiet.
There you go. Dark, cold, and quiet. That's right. Yep. Yeah. Not having your pets in the bed with you.
Bear cave, basically.
Bear cave. There you go.
Dark, cold, hibernate.
Exactly. Yes.
I think people, it's amazing how many people, I think either one, their beds are too small.
Oh, interesting.
Because so they're like piled up on, I don't personally like to be touched while I'm sleeping. Like I
That's good. Let's get into it.
I do not like to be touched. Do not touch. If somebody touches me while I'm sleeping, I'll wake up and I'll like shove them. Get off me. I don't like it. It definitely
is it the heat or is it just
it's
like
the heat.
Yeah.
Then it's like it focuses my mind on that point of contact, and so I can't let go and just fall asleep as much.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I do get hot, and then that can get sweaty or whatever. So those aren't good for sleeping. Hot and sweaty is not good, and just where your mind then is drawn to something. But then animals in bed too. I know a lot of people sleep with their animals in bed.
They do, yeah, and of course they're not going to listen to you if you're like, don't touch me.
Again,
don't lay on my face.
Yeah.
Like
some of our best friends, they had a queen bed, which is, I believe, too small for a couple. Personally, it's like, what are you sleeping in a child's bed? It's like you might as well be in a twin. But and then they had two large dogs, 70 plus, 70, 60, 70 pound dogs that would sleep in bed with them as well. And they had sent these hilarious pictures of like, the dogs like laying on them and like blankets and, the dog. And they sleep like that. So I was like, how do you even sleep like that?
Right. So you're right. Yeah. And I would say, even though it's probably beautiful and comfortable and people love it, they love the snuggle, right? Some people can sleep by other people, that's okay.
It freaks me out. No,
it is normal.
I get that.
It's normal to sleep. You may be maybe the exception. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe not.
You just
You're
see
saying
this
just
in
explore
TV and
it.
movies. It's all lies. It just paints this picture of like, let's cuddle together and fall asleep and the romance.
You're like,
and stuff.
no.
I'm like, all I see is hot sweat when I see that. Just get away from me.
All right. So Barry is saying, don't sleep by anybody.
I would try to sleep apart from somebody. I would just give it a shot.
They do have those body pillows. Like
those are cool. In Europe, speaking of Europe, another great thing Europeans have, and I've tried to incorporate this here in my lifestyle, but my wife refuses to do this, is they actually have sheets and separate sheets and blankets on each side of the bed. Now, this was when we were in Hungary.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was fascinating and it was awesome. So imagine you have your own sheet.
Wait, were you tucked in like a burrito?
Yeah, you could if you wanted to. Like you could physically prevent another person from like touching you with your own sheet and blanket, and you could dial your temperature in.
Oh, okay. That's like the sleep bed,
that's what I think the thing is with the temperature, because that's obviously a big one. So the temperature, and they have cool cooling and heating elements for beds. They're relative, and I've heard amazing things about them, and I would totally do that. But they are typically like $800 to $1,500 to get those.
You want to make, and if you're already doing well, like then maybe you don't need a sleep cooling bed. Right. Yeah. And I always kind of worry a little bit about sleeping on electricity. Like it's not recommended that you sleep with like a heating pad because of the electromagnetic field that it creates. You can let it warm up your bed, but then turn it off like when you get in. So I would be concerned too about having something that's constantly like the electricity. But again, just my perspective, maybe not a big deal in it, like the whole of your health, but I think that electromagnetic radiation is just something to consider.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So coming back to, we've got the sleep hygiene, right? Yep. No TV, and the TV is not supposed to be in the bedroom. And the thought is, well, this is just the recommendation of like, the bedroom is only for sleep. Now I can't say that I necessarily, agree with that, right? You should be able to use your bedroom, but there are some sleep specialists that say like, you should only sleep in there. Your body should get really used to only having like sleep in the room. Like don't put your office in there. Like don't hang out in there, right? Just make it sleep oriented, especially if you have a real problem. So, but that is a little more extreme, right?
Yeah.
It's a little more
space
extreme.
dependent, but I hear what they're saying on that.
Yeah.
I don't like a TV in the bedroom, but I do think that, you do your best you can with having it be an area where you create a space conducive to sleep, right? I think that's a good way to think about it.
Yeah, I think so too. So then when we go on, like we start thinking, I would say probably stress might be the number one outside of that. And that is, I think, working on, you need to work on ways to quiet your mind before bed. We call it the monkey mind, right? Like how do you slow yourself down a little bit? And sometimes meditation, not using your computer or a device like an hour before bed. Also putting like the red shift on whatever device. If you are using a device, there are apps for that. Like they can red shift your computer or your phone because that blue light's stimulating. But if you can, just read a book, go old school, right? Have paper and do things that are relaxing for yourself. Don't work all the way up to like bedtime, which I know a lot of entrepreneurs do, right? And then there's, you can use things for sleep, which are really nice, which are like that would be calming, like the sleepy time tea and chamomile tea. And that kind of gets you in that ritual of like slowing down, right? And slowing your mind down.
Yeah, I think this is where you do a little diagnosis. Yeah, what is the challenge that you're having? Are you having a hard time falling off to sleep?
Yes.
And then, is it primarily your mind's racing, your body feels amped, or your temperature is wrong, or whatever? So I think there, when you're kind of self-diagnosing, or when you come in here, one of the things we're going to explore is, what's the issue? Is it the falling off to sleep, and that kind of transitioning from a waking state to a sleeping state that the struggle is? Because everything you just talked about there can really help pinpoint some very specific strategies that can help get you into a space where you can fall asleep.
Right.
Then I think there's the additional issue or problem, which is staying asleep.
Yeah.
Which can also be connected to some of these things as well, with your mind and stress and not being able to turn the mind off, or stimulants too close to bedtime.
Yeah.
Obviously things like caffeine, but also alcohol kind of acts in that way as a stimulant when it comes to the sleep portion. Oftentimes it creates a spike.
It does, yeah, because you have the. A lot of people will use it to relax at night, and then it disrupts their sleep. So, I think that one, maybe even two could be okay, but 2 drinks. But I think when you're beyond that and it's nighttime, many times that is,
a glass of wine generally for most people can be well tolerated, or splitting a bottle of wine over a period of time. But I think then it's beyond that. You're typically going to get some kind of a spike.
It's going to be like blood sugar crashing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's going to be because your liver's processing, and so that comes back to like your adrenal glands, and a lot of people will be tired during the day, and then they ramp up. Their cortisol is really low. It ramps up at night, and it keeps them from sleeping. So we call that a reverse curve. And so we have to work and those are the people that are like, oh my gosh, I get my second wind, like at 7. The night owl, right? Yeah. It's like, no, your rhythm is totally thrown off. Like we need to get you energy during the day, so then that cortisol can be nice and high, and then it'll drop, and then it'll reverse with the melatonin rise. So melatonin then goes up, and so and then helps to kind of shut everything down, and then you get your growth hormone release and all of that once your melatonin is good. So adrenals are definitely key in coming back into that stress cycle, I guess.
And there's a lot of like good sleep. You just mentioned a number of, from a hormonal standpoint, both for men and women, so critical for proper hormonal function.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So now here's the other thing. I mean, definitely hormone disruption can absolutely mess with your sleep, and where we start really seeing it is when women are getting what we call perimenopausal, meaning, and that can even happen like late 30s, early 40s, where you just the hormones are changing, right? Like so that it's the progesterone that starts like just dropping down. And progesterone helps, is amazing for sleep. And actually men can do progesterone if there is a sleep issue. And that ties into cortisol and adrenal support. And so for women, especially like getting that like measurement, especially like starting mid-cycle and on, so after ovulation. And then that's when your progesterone really spikes, like supporting that. So sometimes I'll just give women natural, based on looking at their whole picture and other symptoms, or if they're hormonal based symptoms, we'll do some natural progesterone at night, and it can be amazing, like amazing for sleep. And actually there are studies for progesterone for men for sleeping as well. So,
the hormone imbalance is one of the major, it's our third our third energy killer, so
yes.
it is definitely part of what we have to look at when we're looking at the sleep issue and the overall energy issues. I mean, here we're talking specifically about hormones as it relates to sleeping, but we could look at the whole picture on the hormone panel as well, because as you were talking about the cortisol, that's a huge factor in your energy during the day as well, what your hormone situation is, and can be very challenging to kind of put a finger exactly on what's going on there without some kind of testing, without looking at it from through a couple different lenses.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's where we would get so when we're coming into hormone testing, we would test cortisol for sure. And you want to get several different samples. Ideally, they have the salivary-based ones.
Yeah, the tricky thing is with hormones is they're constantly in flux, right?
Yes.
So if a person's on some kind of hormone altering, like a birth control, it's a whole...
Should be okay with cortisol, actually.
Oh, really?
Thyroid and cortisol should be okay with...
Still fine to...
with birth control. Yeah. It's just the actual progesterone and estrogen.
That's going to be harder to put a finger on.
It is, yeah. So, but the cortisol, absolutely. And then you want to do the morning, because it shifts, right? It should spike in the morning. It should stay kind of high throughout the day with little dips. And then around 5, it should come down. So you want a salivary morning, noon, 5 p.m., and then 9, 10 p.m. So even our basic, Quest lab, because they make it as a specialty lab too, which is all out of pocket, but you can actually just get it through Quest and have your insurance pay for it. So that's kind of cool.
That's really
cool. A lot of people don't know that.
So that's one to look at. What about thyroid? That obviously is something that comes up a lot. And it seems like there's some common mistakes that we see with looking at thyroid testing and what people are looking at.
Yes, exactly. So definitely want the TSH, which is pretty basic. That's what your standard doc is going to do. But then you want the free T3, free T4. You want to look at the antibodies, which are the TPO and TG antibodies for any sort of Hashimoto's. And you want to check iodine levels. That's super important because most of your thyroid is iodine, actually. And that's why they added it to the salt back in the 1940s. Because your thyroid grows. If you need more iodine, it starts trying to capture more. And we don't really see them that often anymore, but the goiters, do you remember, have you ever seen a very large thyroid?
I can't say that I have.
Way more common, I would say, back in the day. I'm not saying that we would have 50s, 60s. Obviously, we weren't seeing it back.
A little before my time.
Yeah, just a little bit before. Yeah, pictures, right?
It might come back though because we see all these specialty salts. I know that it is something that we have seen a shift, right? Because we have so many people with with their Himalayan sea salt, or I know I'm a big fan of. There's a French brand that a
Himalayan.
Yeah, which.
Yes. A Himalayan, or French sea salt.
I use French.
Oh, okay.
I use it's from it's French coastal sea salt.
Oh, okay.
Oh, it's the best finishing salt.
Is it like a gray salt?
It's a pure, beautiful, crystalline, white flake.
Oh, that sounds lovely.
Oh, it's incredible.
You can tell.
But there's all kinds of great. I mean, there's all kinds of these salts out there.
That don't have iodine.
Yeah, the black one.
Yeah,
that's that kind of specialty. So it's looks cool.
I like the smoky gray. I can't remember where it's from.
Smoky gray. It's cool. Yeah,
it's really, really nice.
There's actually a cool salt company right here in Seattle. I don't know where they get their salt from, but they do all kinds of specialty salts.
Oh, wow.
Out in Woodinville. Cool salts, really neat.
Oh, that is cool. I didn't know that.
You can go tour the factory, I think, and taste all the salts. Ooh. But all of those salts none of them give you iodine.
They don't give you iodine. Ironically, sea salt, you think iodine because it comes, seaweed has iodine. Yeah. Right, exactly. So you have to do the iodized salt, really ideally, you just get it tested first to make sure.
No, and there's some issues too with where a person's getting iodine from as well, right? Don't you have to?
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan anymore of actual seaweed, just because most of it is coming from the Japan, Korea area.
Contamination issues.
Yeah, just there's a nuclear reactor that's still leaking there for the last 11 years. So that seaweed is probably now if you're getting it from North Atlantic, if you're getting it from Norway, if you're getting it from those other, I would trust that a whole lot more. But that's why, because when you go to Whole Foods, it's all, if you look at it, it's from Korea. So I don't know. That's just, again, my thing. I'm just don't put contaminated seaweed to get your iodine in your body.
Totally.
Yeah.
Exactly. The sources matter. What about the one hormone that we haven't really talked about is insulin?
Oh, yes. So great. Yes.
Insulin obviously must play some kind of a role there as a kind of a transport energy mechanism.
Yes. So that's a great point. Yes. So So what many times happens is people will be woken up from a drop in like their insulin gets spiked because your liver, how your brain basically has continuous energy is because your liver will release sugar on a continuous basis so again, your brain can survive, right? But that does trigger insulin release. And so if there's too much, like if you're starting to get into some insulin resistance, which means that your pancreas is actually, on average, it's putting out higher amounts, right? To kind of deal with the extra sugar you have all during the day, then you're going to get more of a drop, at night. And that drop, and what's so cool is I have some people who are on continuous glucose monitors and wearing the patch,
Much
right?
more, yeah, it's kind of a popular trend
It
right
is,
now.
yeah. And in fitness, not for type 2
No,
necessarily,
yeah, for
type 2,
Basically,
yeah, for fitness.
to see how food is interacting with your body and what it's doing.
It's fascinating. And so I started having these women who are doing it when they were waking up was when their blood sugar was dropping, and they're like, they could see it right with the app, and it's like, oh my God, that's so what we started doing is for those people, they started just adding some protein at bedtime, and it allowed just that continuous release, and when they stopped getting that big drop because the liver is sending out a bunch of stuff, so it helped. So protein at bedtime was enough to kind of keep that insulin level steady. Yeah, I know. And I think also if you're needing to clean up your diet during the day, then that could be another reason too. Might do both.
Yeah, that's very interesting. One thing that is clear too, that when we're looking at energy and energy killers, I think one of the things we have to talk about is just straight up when you're in pain, chronic pain, inflammation.
Yes.
That can be a major energy killer.
Huge. And that's it's a little bit of a bigger topic, but I mean, just diving into the cause of pain, I think is it's got to be part of the plan, and it, and also if we can shift you to something natural. And so for
instance, pain medic, if you're taking on some kind of,
yes, like you're taking Advil,
you're taking Advil or Tylenol or whatever on a regular basis.
Exactly. So again, treat the cause, whatever that underlying cause is.
What would you say is, if you're taking that for what period of time would you say then you should really start to look at the underlying issues? So for instance, if you take it for a couple of days, no big deal. But if you're on it for a couple of weeks or 7 days, is there a kind of a trigger?
Yeah, like a pattern.
Yeah,
I would say definitely if you never have pain and then now you've taken it for a week, or usually that relates back to injury of some sort, right? Yeah, it's time,
and if it's longer term than that, then definitely.
Yeah. And that can even tie into like, I use Advil like only for one day, but then the next week I use it again, and the next week I use it again. And now I've got months worth of now needing Advil. Then you've got to figure it out. You've got to address what's happening, wherever that pain is coming from. And that's, orthopedic doc, come see us, see your chiropractor. Like you've got to just initiate something. Unless, there are different types of pain, musculoskeletal, nerve, all of that. So,
chronic infection.
In an area that could absolutely be, sinus.
There's a lot. Yeah, you want to get in there and figure it out.
Yeah, we got to figure it out. Pain is a signal. Pain is not bad. It's just a signal, right? That you need to address something. You need to figure it out.
It can be tricky to figure out. Yeah, especially if it's a musculoskeletal issue type thing or something that is getting constantly triggered by like either repetitive use or, I like to sleep with my right arm tucked underneath my pillow.
Yeah.
And for years, I sleep like this all the time. And then I'll tuck also my left arm if I lay kind of on my left side.
Yeah.
But my right shoulder over the past year will sometimes get triggered from sleeping like that.
Yeah.
It'd be quite painful. And I've gone in to get it adjusted and looked at and kind of figuring it out. And of course, part of the solution is, don't sleep like that.
Right.
Part of that, the problem is you might be patterned or conditioned to do something, or maybe it was from like a overuse injury that's related to work. Yeah. And you can't just stop doing the thing. So then you have to get a little bit more creative in figuring it out.
Strap your arm down.
Yeah, exactly. Right hand strap.
While you're sleeping.
Strap to my leg. My dead arm.
Yes, I know about that right shoulder. It's like, put it out there. We got to work on that right shoulder.
And that's where here we would look at stuff like we might look at ozone.
Yes.
We might look at some injectables, PRP.
Yeah.
We would start to look at what are some additional things we can do to support that. Or we might look at maybe some natural ways of lowering inflammation or some natural ways to kind of help bring some kind of healing into that area without needing to, kind of go down that Advil or Tylenol path chronically.
Absolutely. I was going to say that if we can do some substitutions, like if we can substitute like turmeric over the long term, it takes like 4 to 6 weeks to really kick in. And so you have to just kind of give it that window. It's not going to be like Advil, where you're like, oh, I took 2,000 milligrams of turmeric and boy, that pain is gone just like Advil does.
And we would say that for many herbal or kind of like non-prescriptive treatments, that oftentimes there's a buildup.
There is, yeah. And so, I mean, you want to give it that time, but the studies are really good on turmeric and long-term use and reduction of pain at about 2,000 milligrams a day, as well as I really like proteolytic enzymes away from food. So if you take a proteolytic enzyme away from food, it actually reduces joint inflammation and kind of like that fibrous, tissue. It starts to break that down. Right. So it's, fantastic. But again, you have to just don't take it with food because then it just digests your food. And then ozone, as you mentioned, I love, but that's a more dedicated therapy. It's oxygen type therapy that we can either do locally, right? Or we can do systemically, meaning it goes all throughout your body and can be incredible for joint pain and other like chronic infections and things. But it is, you gotta be willing to come in and do the therapy, basically. Yeah.
But it can be very effective.
Very
for chronic
effective.
pain.
Absolutely.
Like achy joints and this, kind of wear and tear over time. I think there was a football player story you tell us, a patient, right, who had tons of, just degeneration in the joints and chronic pain that had been long lasting over years that, isn't something that you can really get adjusted or whatnot, and had great success with ozone. So it's something we've seen a lot of success with in terms of some of those aches and pains. Yeah,
I've seen it. I have, besides my pro football player who responded so well to the systemic ozone because he had basically pain in every joint. And I have had some elderly or seniors, right, that have just chronic degeneration in a lot of different joints. And it's kind of the same thing. It's like, well, do you want to inject, do prolozone on every single joint, which it's a lot for people, right? Just do it systemically, and it's fantastic. But I've even done it for like somebody who has carpal tunnel. And he builds piers under the water, and so it's really hard for him he's got to be able to use his hands, right? And so he doesn't really love the injections, like into looking into you do a lot of the forearm and some hand injections. So we do it systemically, and it's incredible. Like he does a high dose, and it's like it will resolve it for a while.
The ozone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one of my list of my favorite therapies.
Yeah. It's a lot. We have a long list of favorite.
We have a long
that
list.
One you do love.
Yeah.
Well, what about like one of the things too? I think we should cover off on maybe our last topic that we want to just touch on here is immune function and issues where we have chronic hidden infections. That can be an energy killer for some people.
Absolutely. So I would say again, I would put this at the kind of the top of the list of. It's just something we absolutely have to dive into and explore, because most people don't know that they're walking around with some sort of chronic infection, right? I mean, it's not really standard to look for that with your standard doc. They're not going to check you for chronic reactivated mono, so that's like your EBV, CMV, HHV6, and parvo, and not the parvo that's in dogs. That's totally different. This is a mono virus, but there are other types of chronic infections too that we look for. And so those can be, if your immune system, there can be different reasons your immune system is struggling a little bit, or you could just have picked up a pretty strong strain of this virus, right? Or one of those viruses, and it is wearing your body down, right? So
It's like it's an energy sap, an internal energy sap.
Yeah.
Your body's constantly kind of fighting
your
against
immune
it,
system.
trying to suppress it, deal with it.
Yeah. Like when you think about how you feel when you catch a flu, you're like, oh my God, like I'm tired, I'm achy, and so you get like a mini version of that in your cells going on all the time. And there are times when, because your immune system does start adapting right over time, that you're like, oh, I'm better, and then something happens. Maybe you don't sleep well, or you're super stressed, or you get your, you eat a ton of your food allergy.
Right. Or you have a bunch of sugar.
The sugar is an immune suppressor. Yeah. You have a big weekend, like all the things. And then like that virus will just come raging back. Right. And it will replicate and drag you down. Right. Again. So then you have to kind of your immune system has to sort of restart the process of like fighting it and suppressing it. And so what we do is we identify them, and then we start giving you immune support, and so that could look like in the form of oral supplements like C and A and zinc and D, right? But then, and sometimes also herbs that are antiviral, like lauric acid, which is monolaurin, a coconut extract, lysine, St. John's wort actually is one of them. And then it just keeps, we have a lot of those. And many times you're in blends.
A lot of tools there in that tool belt.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. But that's where we start to go after it.
Yeah, and IV therapy, right? So like high-dose IV vitamin C and glutathione for the immune system. I know.
High-dose glutathione.
Y'all have to check out our glutathione. Yes, we're really getting into glutathione.
On Sage Health TV, definitely check out the glutathione episode. Yes. It's something we're big fans of. What about, I know here in the Northwest in particular, mold can be a major factor.
So mold is, absolutely in the Northwest. I mean,
we have a whole series on mold.
We do. Series. We have a great series.
Because it's very prevalent.
It's very prevalent. And a lot of people think, they're like, well, of course I have mold exposure because I live here and I'm outside. And yes, there is that. But what we're talking about is the inside exposure that people a lot of times have unknown, like something is growing in your house, and you just aren't aware of it. And it could just be in your attic and you've lived with it for years, and those mold toxins they start dragging you down. And one thing I'll just say about that is that a lot of times people dismiss it. They might notice like a musty smell, or they are like, oh yeah, we had water damage in our bathroom. And then, and maybe we kind of fixed it. We have no idea what's growing underneath. But everybody else is fine and I'm tired. So I'm sure it's not that, right? It can't be that because everybody in my family is just fine. And that is not true. It's really common. And this comes back to genetics, actually, that there are groups of people that are very, very mold sensitive and cannot detoxify it. They just can't. And so these mold toxins, they're exposed, at the same time, maybe their husband's exposed and the husband's just fine. The kids actually are doing quite well because they have growing energy, they're doing good. And then that person is exhausted and struggling and has brain fog and just, it's really fascinating. And so then you do a measurement of like mold toxins. You're like, oh my gosh,
And that's somebody you have come into the house and do a mold toxin?
Yeah, actually, we have a inspector that we absolutely love, and his name's Jason Kester in his company. And the reason why he's super thorough and he doesn't treat. And while that's why that's important is because he's not going to be motivated to recommend something.
Right. He's just all about discovery.
Yeah, just about. Yeah. And then going, yes, this is, you have these types of very toxic, highly toxic spores in your house,
That seems like something that everybody should get tested.
Kind of in Washington, I feel like.
Every time we talk about it, I'm like, I absolutely need to get that tested.
You know what you would start with, actually, if you didn't want to. So Jason is I think he's about $1,600 to come in, but he does, gets into the attic, goes under, he does he's like in the corners doing the little dust samples, but if you want to start with something, you can do an ERMI test, which sounds like a Sesame Street thing. I know it's like
ERMI test. Yeah.
ERMI test.
Pass the Cookie Monster test.
but ERMI in capital letters, an ERMI test. And it's on our website. Like if you go to our blog, I have it listed there. And what it will do is it will tell you basically the amount of like toxic spores that you have in your house specifically. You take different samples and then they will tell you, and what's kind of cool is that you can consult with them, the company, and say, based on the types of spores, because they come back and it's like 2 pages worth of spores that are hanging out in people's houses in small font, right? And you're like, is this concerning? I don't, maybe. First they look at percentage and then they give you types, right? So you can call them and say, based on the types that I have, because there are types of spores that are actually more damaging to human health than others and tend to have a huge impact, right? So if you have those particular ones, they'll tell you. They don't necessarily indicate it on the report, but you can call them and they'll tell you like, oh yeah.
So that maybe is an easier
These are the
start.
Bad ones. Yeah. You need to go further. Yeah. And investigate. So it's crazy. It can be quite devastating actually to health. I mean, we have some people that come here, and I'm not trying to scare people or freak people out, but it has literally destroyed their health. Like they have had to almost do a full like pull back, treat the mold, of course, and then just struggling so much, like can't even get out of bed, and we've watched them. It takes months for them to slowly build back up. So if you're suspicious of it, I would say don't, like to that person, like don't wait, 6 months.
Don't sleep on it.
Right. Don't sleep. Exactly.
Literally, though, don't sleep on the mold. The toxic mold is getting you. No. Yes. Well, I think the big takeaway is we kind of have gone through our top 5 energy killers. Each one of these areas in a way we could spend hours on. We could spend whole podcasts, and we have tons of different resources out there. This is a place to start in thinking about restoring, rebuilding, renewing your energy. This is a good lens. These 5 are kind of 5 areas that you can start to look at. And of course, that's what we do here, obviously, is get into that specialized and personalized approach, is to really help figure out and have that trusted guide, advisor asking the right questions with the right testing to understand and get a clear picture for you as an individual, what is impacting your energy. And then we can get into figuring out through all of the variety of cool tools we talked about today, and a bunch of other cool stuff that we didn't even get to. We didn't talk about beamer therapy. We didn't talk about infrared. There's so many great tools we have in the tool belt to help figure out and solve the energy issue. But a big part of it is figuring, out what specifically for you is going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do, one thing I want to mention, because we have talked about so much, I know this could probably sound really overwhelming to someone. They're like, oh, I'm tired just listening to this. Really? Where do I even begin? You know what? Don't worry about it. Don't even worry about it. Just come in. That's what I would say, because actually a lot of these things we do on the first time you're here. I test it, so there are mold markers, there are yeast markers, there's, we'll do the thyroid, we'll do the adrenals. We'll just get it all done based on your history and your concerns, right? And your picture. So, what I'm trying to say, let us, guide you and figure out the underlying thing. Don't try to do this yourself, where you're ordering online kits yourself and come in, let us create your plan for you, right?
There's times to do, the DIY approach works really great. And there's other times where it can be a waste of time and effort and be frustrating and ultimately more costly than just going the professional route.
Yeah. Just come in.
This is where we can get your energy issue solved. So, absolutely. Yeah. Well, thanks. This was great. And I'm sure we're going to come back and dive into some of these topics again and take a different approach and get into them. But this is a good overview. And if you're having energy issues, book a consult and we'll get you taken care of.
Yeah. Thank you.
Until next time.
Okay. Next time.
Later.